Well, now it's time to cover something that was deliberately neglected up to this point, and that is calls through the long-distance network that terminate on panel and crossbar 1 end offices. The reason I've held off on this until now is that this involves yet another one of those network sounds. You know, like ta-da-da.
Why don't you make a record?
I'm trying. But in this case, it's tick, ka-ta. The long-distance network of the 1970s generally speaks two languages as far as interoffice signaling of the number you're calling: multi-frequency and dial pulsing. But in large urban areas in the northern part of the United States, there's another language that needs to be spoken: revertive pulsing. The panel switching system, the first automatic switching system in the Bell system, must be communicated to with revertive pulsing. There's no other language that it speaks. The number 1 crossbar system, which came after the panel system, can receive MF, but revertive pulsing is often used just because number 1 crossbar has so much revertive pulsing equipment. When a 4A revertive pulses out, it has to engage an auxiliary sender for the revertive pulsing, and the sound this makes is tick, followed by ka-ta. So those two sounds indicate one switching operation, the 4A getting the auxiliary sender, which is RPing, and that's the cut through to the end office. In between that tick and the later ka-ta is when the revertive pulse conversation is going on. But under most circumstances, you don't hear it at all. You just have to wait in silence. This call goes from my Lynbrook crossbar 5 to Hempstead tandem 3,
5166.
Arlington, Virginia 4A,
70310.
which revertive pulses to a number 1 crossbar office in Bethesda, Maryland. Both Arlington and Bethesda are in the Washington, D.C. area. Pardon the ring. The number we called was in 652, or OL2. Its official published area code is 301, correctly indicating that it's in Maryland. Although you could also reach it by dialing 202, the area code for Washington, D.C. In this case, I'm dialing 301, but no matter which code you dial, Hempstead has to send 10 digits to Arlington 4A, which gets an auxiliary sender, which RPs with the crossbar 1. And that's the cut through. When a 4A connects directly to a panel, it has to get the auxiliary sender. If they want revertive pulsing to a crossbar 1, same thing. Sometimes it's even done to 5-bar NESS, but that's rare. 4Ms do the same thing and sound the same. And since there is a significant pause before that first tick, see, all that time, maybe some sort of MFing is going on, but we never found out. What follows, I think, is the only recording I have that actually shows what happens between the tick and the ka-ta. It goes from my Long Island crossbar 5 to Hempstead 3,
5166.
Washington 1 4A, 2024, formerly called 2022, to a District of Columbia panel. And it's pretty much self-explanatory. That's actually a crossbar 1 type supervision test. This goes to show they work in panels. This is the EM2 panel. In DC, I'd guess that means embassy. And actually 362 could be EMB, assuming DC had a period years ago where you had 3-letter dialing. I know New York did. Since the first few calls here are to the DC area, I guess I'm going to have to stop and explain the interchangeable area code situation that DC had during the 1970s. In 1970, we find the Maryland suburbs with official area code 301. Bethesda is 301. It says so on the phone. But you can call it with 202. Similarly, Arlington, a Virginia suburb, has area code 703. It says so on the phone, but you can call it with 202. This dates back to an earlier time when direct distance dialing was not universal, and there were only certain places that could be called. For example, there was a time in New York City where Washington, D.C. was dialable, but Baltimore was not. As late as 1978, you could still see signs of this by picking up a panel in New York City and comparing how the two area codes, 301 for Maryland and 202 for the D.C. area, are handled. Here's what happens when I pick up my phone and dial 301 from the West 73rd Street panel. That pulsing indicates my panel office is setting up the route immediately after I dial this area code for Maryland.
I'm sorry. We are unable to complete your call as dialed. Please check the number and dial again, or ask your operator for assistance. This is a recording. 21243. I'm sorry. We are unable to...
Now this is the 1970s, and my panel can now MF out, but it couldn't do that in the old days.
This is a recording. 21243.
21243 is the toll center that both Maryland and the D.C. area go through now. But there's still a difference. Let me dial 202. Do you hear that? It's a second dial tone. Muted, but it's still there. This panel equipment has now gone into a reset, starting over, as it were, in Washington, D.C. mode. It's no longer storing the digits 202. Instead, relays have been latched to put it into a different mode than it would be for local calls. It doesn't do this if I dial Maryland 301 or Virginia 703. This is a leftover from the old days. There, now our surrogate DC dial tone has been broken, and the route gets set up on the 6th digit. So as you can see, 202 is not handled like the other long-distance area codes. Now this is the 1970s, so it is going to end up MFing to 21243.
I'm sorry. We are unable to complete your call as dialed.
But in the older days, it didn't MF at all. That capability wasn't even added until the 1960s. What did it do before? We can still hear an example of it, because as late as 1978, you still had the old way of handling limited long distance if you were calling northern New Jersey. 201. There's the second dial tone. Starting over in New Jersey mode is important now, because we're not going to be MFing out. We've set up the route on the third digit of the New Jersey number. The 201 is long forgotten. When I dial the last digit, you'll hear my panel using an ancient communication protocol, PCI, panel call indicator pulsing.
I'm sorry, we are unable to complete your call as dialed. Please check the number and dial again, or ask your operator for assistance. This is a recording. 2128. I'm sorry, we are unable to
VZ Tandem 3 in the famous 140 West Street building made it possible for a panel or a crossbar 1, even a crossbar 5, that could not MF out to nonetheless be able to call long distance. The second dial tone on 202 means that sometime earlier there was some New York tandem, perhaps VZ3, perhaps another, that received 7 or 8 digits of PCI on a special trunk group dedicated to Washington, D.C. area traffic. They had to have a separate trunk group for each area code that was intended to be called, which would then take the 7 or 8 digit number over PCI. Now, there was a time when customers in New York dialed 112 to call New Jersey, not area code 201. It's possible that another 11X code was used for Washington, D.C., or maybe by the time they had that kind of dialing, they dialed 202. This I don't know, but certainly Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Connecticut all gave second dial tones from the panels in New York City, as well as Westchester and Long Island. All the other area codes didn't give a second dial tone, suggesting that they weren't dialable until panels could MF. Now imagine it's sometime in the 50s or early 60s. Direct dialing to Washington, D.C. from New York is being opened up. The phone company knows that the 202 area code is destined to be exclusive to the District of Columbia, but they can't leave it there. Otherwise, you'll have direct dialing to Capitol Hill, but not the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, or the hospital in Bethesda, Maryland. So they had to do this. They created buffer zones in Maryland and in Virginia that officially were part of those states with the appropriate area codes, but you could treat them as if they were D.C. In fact, if you were calling from those areas, local calls were dialed on a 7-digit basis, no matter what part of the area you were calling. So if you were in Arlington and you wanted to call this guy,
Hello.
you could just dial 7 digits, even though he was in another state. What if you were in Arlington and you wanted to call Shenandoah, Virginia, a very rural place with an independent phone company? It's in the same area code as you are, so you might think that you could just pick up the phone and dial 652 whatever. Well, that's not going to work. 652 is going to go to Bethesda.
Hello.
If you want to call Shenandoah in your same state and your same area code, you have to dial your own area code, 703, followed by 652, and then you'll get the right place. The situation was the same in the Maryland suburbs, of course. To call Baltimore in your same state and your same area code, you had to dial it, 301. Now that is strange, weird, and confusing. But to the people living in the area, it was even simpler than the dialing instructions for other parts of the country, because the directory simply said, for local calls to the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia suburbs, dial 7 digits. For long distance, dial the area code plus the number. That was so simple and didn't even involve dialing 1 first, that few people actually thought about the fact that if you were in Arlington where your area code was 703, to dial out from your phone, it was really as if you were in 202, the District of Columbia. So the D.C. area way of dialing outgoing calls from phone lines was really, really simple. 7 digits for local, 10 digits for long distance. It only got confusing if you thought about it. And fortunately, the Bell system did that for everyone, so the customers didn't have to. Obviously, there had to be fairly complex rules regarding assigning office codes in that area to make sure you didn't have code conflicts where it would be a problem. But they took care of it all. It worked great. Now, on our first call to Bethesda, Maryland, Via the Arlington, Virginia 4A, things are a little different. The Arlington 4A
70310
is not like an Arlington customer. It is in the 703 area, period. It has to be, because it's part of the long-distance network, not the DC local area. So if you send 652, just 7 digits, into the Arlington 4A, you're going to get Shenandoah. If you want to call Bethesda, Maryland,
Hello.
you have to send 10 digits. But you can send 301 or 202, whichever the customer dialed is just fine. And that's why Hempstead sends 10 digits to call Bethesda via the Arlington 4A. This next call is to JE8 in Falls Church. That's a Virginia suburb in the Arlington sector. Much simpler. In this case, Hempstead sends only 7 digits. No confusion there. Even though I dialed area code 202, doesn't matter. Works fine. Here's JE8, a crossbar 1 in Falls Church via Hempstead 3
5166.
to the Arlington 4A,
70310
which RPs to the crossbar 1.
Number you're calling?
Those subtle ticks associated with the operator give it away as the Western Electric AIS in centralized intercept emulation mode. Now here's a call to JE8 dialed with area code 703. It goes through the same way.
Leave a number you call, please.
538-7503.
538-7503?
Yes.
Thank you.
The number you have reached, 538-7503, is not in service. Please check the number and dial again. 538.
In 1976, the DC area had AIS. But prior to that time, say 1974, it had centralized intercept. The next call is to the LI6 crossbar 1 in 1974. LI6 is in the 202 part of DC. Official area code 202, and you have to dial that one. So here's the LI6 crossbar 1 via Hempstead 3, Washington 3 4A,
2022.
which RPs.
Here's Washington, D.C. intercept.
I'm sorry. The number you have called is not a working number. Please check the number before dialing again. This is a recording. I'm sorry. The number you have called is not a working number. Please check the number before dialing again. This is a recording.
Dispatch operator, what number did you dial?
223-9920.
Thank you. Sorry, that's not a working number.
Thank you.
Washington, D.C. was the only place that used that particular text.
The number you have called is not a working number. Please check the number before dialing again.
And that voice was not heard anywhere else in the long-distance network. But But if you were local, you heard her on your local 311.
I'm dialing from 202-393, and their vacant code is Washington, D.C. Standard Voice, which it wasn't last time I was here, but now it is, so fortunately I now have a tape of it.
I'm sorry, we are unable to complete your call as dialed. Please check the number and dial again, or ask your operator for assistance. This is a recording.
No crosstalk whatsoever. Now I'll see if the permanent signal recording is standard also. I can just imagine it. Please hang up and dial your call again.
Speaking of familiar voices, DC had its own semi-automatic intercept system. They actually called it AIS, but it was an IBM system like the one in Brooklyn, but it was custom designed for C&P. As so often happens in number one crossbar, there was no permanent signal recording. It just clicked off into a district with nothing connected to it.
Oh no.
Oh yes, that's number one crossbar for you. So I didn't hear that voice again, but I did hear this.
What number did you dial?
321-9804.
The number you have called, 3219804, is not yet connected. Will you please dial 393-9920 in the District of Columbia? This is a recording. Will you please dial 393-9920?
It's kind of creepy if you're used to the Brooklyn one. There were very few of those, and each one was unique. Next, let's call Philadelphia, the PI5 panel. It'll go through Hempstead 3 to Philadelphia 2 4M.
I'm the recording.
What recording?
2152.
Which RPs to the panel?
The number you have reached is not in service. In area code 215, please check the number and dial again. The number you have reached is not in service. In area code 215.
What number you're calling, please? The number you're reaching is not in service in the 215 area.
Now here's a panel in Cleveland, 221. It goes through Hempstead 3 to Cleveland 2 4A
2162.
to Cleveland 1 4M 21615, formerly known as 2162. But in August 1972, they added Cleveland 2, and then sometime after that, it became the sectional center, demoting the 4M to a Class 3 with recording ID 21615. Because this goes through a 4A in Cleveland to get to the 4M in Cleveland, after Hempstead cuts through, you're going to hear two ticks. The first one, Cleveland 2 cutting through to Cleveland 1, and that's Cleveland 1 picking up the auxiliary sender to start RPing. And when it's done, here goes. When I first heard that call, I was thinking, why didn't Hempstead just send it to Cleveland 1? I knew Hempstead had direct trunks to Cleveland 1 in the early 1970s, but then I thought about it and said, wait a minute, maybe Hempstead still doesn't 6-digit translate the 216 area. Maybe Hempstead has only one place to send everything in 216. Well, there's a way to find out, and that is to dial a vacant code in the 216 area.
We're sorry, but we have a problem in completing your call as dialed. Please check the number and dial again, or ask your operator to help you. This is a recording, 2162.
Yeah, we're getting a vacant code from Cleveland. Now, if Hempstead were able to look at the next 3 digits to see which route to send the call to, we wouldn't get to Cleveland on a vacant code. Hempstead would have done this. This is what happens when I dial a vacant code in the 215 area, where Hempstead has 2 or more routes. When you dial a vacant code, Hempstead intercepts it locally. Originally, long-distance tandems didn't do this, but Hempstead was one of the first to do it, and that's why this practice of intercepting distant vacant codes whenever you can is something we called Hempsteadization. Of course, this is the cue for the vacant code recording in Hempstead Tandem 3, and well, if there were ever a nice place to be held waiting forever, okay, let's hear this sound over the long-distance network now from my Crossbar 5 line in Raleigh.
Sorry, your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number and dial again or call your operator to help you. This is a recording. 5167. We're sorry, your call cannot be completed.
That handshake and the recording are coming from Hempstead Tandem 4, which is paired with Hempstead Tandem 3. Tandem 3 goes out from Long Island offices to the world. Tandem 4 picks up calls from those same trunks and connects them to offices in western Nassau County. Prior to 1978, Tandem 4 didn't have the continuous ring, but this is a late recording, so it does now.
We're sorry your call did not go through. Will you please try your call again? This is a recording. 5167. We're sorry your call did not go through.
The ID 5167 was shared with Hempstead Tandem 1, a local tandem. Now let's go back to something we only touched upon briefly earlier in this program, VZ Tandem 3. This was a special crossbar tandem devoted entirely to New Jersey calls from panels and crossbar 1s in New York City. It did the CAMA function, that is, it recorded the call details for billing. And strictly speaking, everything that went through it was long distance. Here's a call from my Manhattan West 73rd Street panel line to a panel in Newark, the Avon Avenue building, through VZ Tandem 3,
2128.
and we'll see how that goes through. If you're listening in a quiet place or with headphones, you'll hear a second dial tone when I dial 201. VZ Tandem 3 RPs directly to the panel. That's why it took so long. And it's on T-carrier, unfortunately. So this is long distance, but it sounds like you're right in the next township. Here's a call to a crossbar 5 in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. It goes from my West 73rd panel, which PCIs to VZ Tandem 3.
2128.
In this particular case, the ANI fails, and so an operator has to key in my number. After that, VZ Tandem 3 MFs directly to the crossbar 5 over N1 carrier, and this still goes to the old classic New Jersey intercept concentrator recording.
Your number, please.
724-0430.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. The number you have dialed has either been disconnected or not assigned. If you think you could have dialed incorrectly, please try again. Thank you. My voice has been recorded. I'm sorry. The number you have dialed has either been disconnected or not assigned. If you think you could have dialed incorrectly, please try again. Thank you. My voice has been recorded.
Now maybe down, please. Now maybe down.
For the concentrator to get an operator nowadays, it calls the Western Electric AIS, and a set of relays, MF5 followed by start. Those are what those two tones were. Prior to 1974, they had an SAIS.
That number is okay. Will you please call 482-1367 again? This is a recording.
Now, the trouble with New Jersey is that even though it is a long-distance call, just check your bill, it's not the sound of long distance because it's too close. The trunks are wire if you're calling Newark quite often. Here are two examples recorded in the daytime from the West 73rd Street Crossbar 5, the other line in my apartment that's served by the local CO. Isn't it cool that you can just switch phone lines and you get a completely different switch that takes a different route? Anyway, on this, my West Side Crossbar 5, the call goes through VZ Tandem 1,
2126.
which MFs to the ESS in each case. The outgoing trunk from VZ1 is wire with nice wireline background tones. In retrospect, this is kind of amazing. We're calling across the Hudson River. We have our own pair of wires where the purity of the busy tone just comes right through. You know, this ringtone was invented before T-Carrier came out. You think they would have made the ring sound like this had they known that the network of the near future was going to make it sound like this? Let's ask them via VZ Tandem 1.
You have dialed a non-working number at Bell Telephone Laboratories, Murray Hill, New Jersey. If you are calling from within Bell Labs, consult your directory. Call 582-3000 from any other area. Thank you.
Never mind. It's a T-Carrier connection to Bell Labs. What can I say? Now, this call to an independent step in High Bridge, New Jersey, sounds more like long distance. It went through VZ Tandem 1 over N3 carrier to the Clinton NX1 tandem, which dialed into this little step tributary.
Hello.
Such a positive, cheerful hello. Too bad I didn't hear it until my phone was hung up.
I'm sorry. The number you have dialed has either been disconnected or not assigned. If you need assistance, please hang up and dial your operator. My voice has been recorded. 10. I'm sorry. The number you have dialed has either been disconnected or not assigned. If you need assistance, please hang up and dial your operator. My voice has been recorded. 10. I'm sorry. The number you have dialed has either been disconnected.
Here you can see that this independent company is aping the New Jersey Bell text. Disconnected or not assigned, my voice has been recorded. In any case, this too went through VZ Tandem 1 to the Clinton NX1 to this office in White House, New Jersey, switch type unknown.
My voice has been recorded. 10.
Anyway, let's go back to my panel line with its VZ3 gateway. Most calls through VZ Tandems 1 and 3 went out directly on N1 or N3 carrier to the terminating office, and most of those were number 5 crossbar.
Your number, please.
724-0430.
What is the number?
724-0430.
This is, of course, N1 carrier to a crossbar 5 in Manasquan. Next, N1 carrier to a crossbar 5 in Little Falls with the other kind of tone plant. Most of the time when you come into a crossbar tandem and it's doing the camera function, that is, it is recording the call details for billing, the register sender dropping out and leaving you on the trunk sounds like this. Bumpta. Under these typical conditions, the office you're calling from is MFing to the crossbar tandem that's doing the camera. And that leads to the final cut-through sound, bumpta.
Am I supposed to stand up and cheer?
But VZ Tandem 3 is a relic of early direct dialing, and so we PCI into it. And that means it has a different kind of register sender, which drops out like this. Here's another. And so what we have here is another sound that crossbar tandems make. There's so many, but this one is only heard where you're PCIing into the tandem and it is doing the call recording. VZ Tandem 3 is the only one that we found in New York City in the late 70s that made this noise. You know, that sound gave Bill quite a scare back in August 1969. He was on a phone trip to Philadelphia. Well, to him it was a phone trip. Whatever family business was going on there was secondary. Anyway, he was using a number 1 crossbar line with old dial tone, and he found that when he called southeastern Pennsylvania's 215 area to points that were long distance, he went through 2158, which is Philadelphia West crossbar tandem. His crossbar 1 office PCI'd to it, and just like VZ3, it was a CAMA office for a limited part of the long distance area. Now that cut-through sound sounded to Bill like answer supervision. So for a long time he was worried that those long-distance calls he was dialing from a relative's phone might be ringing up a bill. Another peculiarity of VZ Tandem 3 was that if you listened really carefully, you could often hear the MFs going out right before the cut-through. That's unique. Here are a couple of calls recorded with high sensitivity. You could hear the MFs there. This is an N3 family trunk, obviously. Here's one more over-recorded so you could hear the MFs. There, see, that click during the ring sounded like it was going off hook. But it's just the VZ3 cut-through.
C caucus, station.
C caucus? That's a new one on me. New Jersey town names, what can I say? Anyway, the next call goes through VZ Tandem 1, which reroutes through the crossbar tandem in Hackenchoken
20124
to reach a crossbar 5 in Hocus Pocus. No, I'm just kidding. We're out of time. We've gotten a rather busy-sounding wire connection to Secaucus. Let's listen for a few seconds. And that's what happens if you don't hang up long enough on a Kama-type trunk. when you're calling from a panel. In the next program, more tick kata calling into New York City and northern New Jersey over long distance. We'll have to go to Atlanta to do it. Then we'll come back to Long Island and make some calls to Chicago, and we'll see what else there's room for.